3:03 a.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a security guard calls 911. The 911 operator asked if the caller needs police, fire, or medical assistance. The caller replied by saying he needs the assistance of the police. The caller said his lead is out there right now. He said he just found a body out in the parking lot. When patrol arrived, they found a woman's dead body wrapped in a blanket. The team hopes to identify the victim through her fingerprint. While the investigation was being carried out on the crime scene, Detective Reggie discovered a camera in a house close to the crime scene that could give them a lead. He and the other detective decided to visit the house to see if they could get footage. After collecting the footage, they headed back to homicide for investigation. While watching the video footage, they discovered that 14 minutes before the security guard called 911, a white car parked where the victim was dumped. Just outside Mobile in Alabama, policemen got a report of a man shot outside his house. A caller who called 911 said the victim was shot in the yard. He said it was life-threatening. Before policemen arrived at the scene, family members rushed the victim to the hospital. The victim was taken to Health University Hospital. 37 years old Joe Dickerson, a car enthusiast who wished to take over his father's garage, is the victim. He was survived by 9 children. Joe was shot once in the abdomen. When mobile detectives arrived at the scene, a witness came forward. The witness agreed to talk when he gets to homicide. The team left the scene of the crime for further investigation at homicide. As soon as they got to homicide, the witness was taken into the interrogation room for questioning. Detective Barnes entered the investigation room to question the witness. Detective Barnes told the witness to tell him what happened. The witness said he has only agreed to talk because the victim is his cousin, and he has a lot of children like him. The witness said he wasn't in the yard when the shooting happened. He said he was at the corner store coming down the street. He said he popped up into the house moments after the shooting. He said he saw the shooter running with a gun in his hand coming down the street. Detective Barnes asked the victim if he knows the shooter. The witness said he knows him very well. He said his name is Dillion Fox. He said the shooter is popularly called Little D, and he just got out of prison. The witness said he can confirm that Dillion Fox is the shooter because he saw a gun in his hand. He said he saw him clearly because it was daylight. Detective Barnes asked the witness the type of gun he saw in the hand of the shooter. He said it wasn't a Clint Eastwood gun. Detective Barnes asked if there was anyone in the house at the time of the shooting, but the witness said he does not know. The witness said the victim had told him that he and Dillion Fox got into an argument. He gave detectives the name of another cousin who saw the victim and Dillion arguing. The detectives asked him when that was. He said it was 20 to 30 minutes before he showed up. The detectives asked if he knows what led to their argument. He said Dillion was mad because the victim was doing better than him. Detective Barnes asked who owns the house where the victim was shot. The witness said the house belonged to their grandmother. He said everybody stays there when they have nowhere to go. He said there were a couple of people he thinks were there at the time of the shooting, but they don't want to talk to the detectives. He said he will try and make them talk. Lead Detective Jermaine Rogers arrives after speaking with other family members at the hospital. When Rogers looks for Fox in the database, he finds that Fox is 34 years old. The team heads out to look for the cousin who witnessed the argument. 13 hours in, detectives track down the cousin at a store near the crime scene. He was taken into the interrogation room for questioning. Immediately, Detective Jermaine entered the investigation room. He asked him to talk about what he knows about the shooting. He said Little D was running his mouth. He said a few moments later, he heard someone calling his name. Detective Jermaine asked him where Little D was standing when he called his name. He said Little D was standing by the yard. Detective Rogers asked him what they were arguing about. He said they were arguing about a couple of dollars. He said Little D was saying his name like everybody that owes me will pay me what they owe me. He said he was just sitting somewhere. He said he left him and turned to the victim. Detective Jermaine asked what he was saying to Joe. He said he was telling Joe that he was going to kill him. He said he felt like he just doesn't like Joe because Joe did not owe him money. He said while Little D was arguing with Joe, he told him he was going to the 8th Street and he will be back. He said he probably went to get a pistol. The witness said he went to a store to get a soda. Little D had already dipped off before he came back. He said it was when he was coming out of the store that he heard a couple of shots. He said it was like pow. Then he heard pow, pow. He said as soon as he heard the shot, he knew something had happened to Joe. He said he knew he premeditated and did it because that was what he always wanted to do. Detective Germain asked the witness if he witnesses the shooting, and the witness said he did not. Detective Germain asked the witness if there was someone in the apartment before the shooting took place. He said his little brother was there. In the murder of an unidentified woman, detectives hope security camera caught the killer leaving her body in a hospital parking lot. The security camera pens away before the suspect got out. Detective Reggie and other detectives watch the video together to see if they can get the suspect or at least get a lead. Detective Reggie said 2 seconds earlier they have gotten a tag. Detective Reggie moved to another camera, but he discovered that the camera did not pen. Detectives looked up for the car and discovered that it was either Toyota or Honda Accord. A few hours later, a detective said he went to the autopsy when they were able to clean her body up. He said shots were all around the victim's body. He said it looks like the victim was just from a very close distance. He said the bullet that killed her was the one that hit her jugular. A few moments later, a detective said he has just received an email from the lab guy. The crime lab got a match on the victim's fingerprint. Her name is Marissa Dowies. Maris Dowies is a 49-year-old woman who was born in Tulsa. She leaves behind 3 children. The detective that received the email from the lab guy searched for Marissa Dowies in the database. He got a name of a guy who had domestic issues with the victim. His name is Lil Roach. He got a 2015 report which revealed that Lily Roach came to the door of the victim and even tried to break the victim's window. He pulled her by her hair. He dragged her and began to choke her. The charges were dropped against him because Marissa did not appear in court. Lil Roach's previous convictions include ferocity and drug convictions. After they finished searching, the detectives agree that he is someone they needed to talk to. They also discovered in the course of searching the database that the victim had a son before she died. Detectives found an address for the son's employer. After some few minutes, the detectives headed up to find the son and the guy that had domestic issues with the victim in the past. Their first point of call is the address of the son's employer. The detectives arrived at the address in a few minutes and met the victim's son there. There is no easy way to say this, but your mom has been killed, a detective said to the son of the victim. The detective told him that his mother was shot this morning. The detective asked the young boy if his mother was dating or married to someone. The young boy said his mother is still married to his stepdad, but he knows they've had problems for years. The detectives asked the young boy the name of his stepdad, and he said his name was Eli Roach. The detectives asked the young boy where Eli was living presently. He told them Eli was living in his grandpa's old house. The detectives appreciated the young boy and left after he gave them the address of his grandpa's old house where he claimed Lil was leaving. The detectives immediately moved to the address to see what they could find. When they got there, they found out that it was a lonely place that seems like nobody was staying there. But they found bloodstains on some objects in the building which prompted the officers to approach a court for a search warrant so that they can search the entire building. The detectives returned to the building after they got a search warrant. This time they entered without hesitation. In the living room, detectives found blood, a single 3D showcasing, and a pillowcase that had the same wrapping as the one the victim was wrapped in when she was shot. After some few minutes, a woman approached the detectives and said she used to date Roach. "Detective, how long have you been dating Roach?" She said she has been dating him for a year. "Detective, what kind of car does he have?" "My car, a white Acura," she replied. The detective pulls up the video of the car seen in the surveillance video and asked her if that was her car. She replied in the affirmative. The detective asked how she would find Roach if she was to find him. He told her to think of some of the places Roach could be at that particular time. She told the detective that she does not know much of Roach's movement. She told them there was no way she could figure out where he would be at that particular moment. Last night on the phone, the family gave detectives an address of where to find the victim's close friend. It was reported that she was the last person that the victim was seen hanging out with. When detectives arrived at the apartment, they knocked and a woman answered. "Detective, I am working on Mary's case and I know she was here the other night." "Yes," she replied. She said it was the night before the last, and she left her apartment about a quarter until 2 a.m. Back to the investigation of Joe Dickerson, detectives identified a possible suspect known as Ernesto Little D, who is Joe's cousin. Now, they need to find an eyewitness who was present at the scene. Joe's cousin, who has been speaking with detectives, told them they would probably get more information from his brother. Detectives asked him where they could find his brother. He said his brother would still be in the yard by the time detectives get back there. He said his brother might be hanging out in the family house while the shooting happened. Detectives left homicide and made their way back to the crime scene to see if they could meet the guy that might probably be there while the shooting happened. As detectives arrived, they found a possible eyewitness and he agreed to talk at homicide. He entered the car with the detectives and they all headed back to homicide. As soon as they arrive at homicide, the witness was taken to an investigation room for question. "You know what we are here for?" a detective asked. "Yeah, for the murder of my cousin," he replied. "I know it's going to be odd to talk about, but Joe needs your help to talk about what happened," the detective told him when he noticed he was still reluctant to talk. He started his speech with the word. Little D did not really like Joe. He said nobody ever figured out why. He said Little D had been drinking that morning, and he was loud all day. He said Little D just started talking out of nowhere and kept talking about how people owed him money. He said a few moments after, Little D started arguing with his brother. He said Little D was ready to fight him. He said his brother was also confronting Little D a little bit. He said Little D calmed down a little bit after he confronted him. He said after that Little D started threatening Joe. He said Little D told Joe that he was going to gun him down if he finds him here when he gets back. He said Little D left and disappeared for a little while, and that was when he got access to a gun. He said he and his uncle was standing in the yard. He said his instincts just told him to stand there. He said he doesn't know why, but out of nowhere, the front door was sprung open, and he saw Little D's arm come out of the house with the pistol. He said that was how Little D shot Joe one time. Back to the murder of Mary, detectives just learned that her estranged husband, Alain Roach, has allegedly threatened to kill her in the past. Detectives are at the home of Mary's friend, whose report showed that she was the last person that hanged out with Mary. Detective, so, in the past when you heard him say, "I'm gonna kill you," did you hear him say that more than once, or you heard him say that one time? A detective asked. "Probably more than once," she replied. Detective, I appreciate you. Take care of yourself. Okay, she replied. As the first 48 winds down, the developing story showed that documents revealed that Mary was shot inside her home, and investigators believed her husband dragged her outside and dropped her body off. An arrest warrant has now been issued out for Alain Roach. In the first 48, Tulsa Homicide responded to the murder of Mary, who was found shot and dumped in a parking lot. Homicide learned that the victim has been allegedly assaulted in the past by her estranged husband, Alain Roach. Homicide detectives headed to their homes to search the apartment. When detectives searched their home, they found bloodstains all over the house and a .380 casing. But they were unable to find Alain Roach. Overnight, patrol officers found the white Acura near the suspect's sister's home. A detective said he spoke with the suspect's sister yesterday. He said his sister told him that he showed up yesterday, and he claimed that he was sleeping outside. She said he was hungry and he needed water. She said she asked him what happened, and he kept saying it was an accident. She said she told him that he needed to turn himself in for questioning so that detectives can do their job. She said he told her that he was never going to turn himself in. She said after some minutes, he took off walking through the Northwest. After searching for Roach for 6 weeks without any luck, the team gets a lead that Roach is hiding in an abandoned trailer in North Tulsa. Detectives immediately made their way to the facility to see if they would find Roach. On getting there, the team detected that there is someone inside the trailer. It is left to see if the person in the trailer is Alain Roach. "Come outside of the door with your hands in the air," a detective said on loudspeaker. After some few minutes, "Time is up. You have to come out now or we are going to deploy paper balls into the trailer," the detective said through the loudspeaker again after they waited and no one came out. After some few seconds, Roach came out and handed himself over to the detectives. The detectives searched the trailer for the 3ED, but it was nowhere to be found. Detectives made their way back to Homicide. Immediately they got to Homicide, Roach was taken into the interrogation room for questioning. Detective Reggie and another detective went into the investigation room where Roach was been held. Detective, honestly, we are here because Mary has died. So, tell us what you know about that. I know that she died, Roach replied. The detective asked him how it happened. He kept quiet for some seconds. After that, he said his gun just went off. Back to the murder of Joe Dickerson. Detective Jermaine Rogers has finally found an eyewitness that said Little D pulled the trigger. The witness, while narrating his side of the story, said after the first shot, they heard a couple of more shots. He said Joe was looking towards the street, therefore he didn't see it coming. He said Little D shot Joe for nothing either than for pure jealousy. As the last 5 hours of the first 48 hours slip away, the search for Little D kicks off. In the first 48, mobile homicide was responded to the murder of Joe Dickerson, who was shot in a family member's yard. Joe's little cousin Ernesto Dillion Fox, who is also known as Little D, had threatened to shoot him after an argument in the past. Detectives have interviewed 2 family members. One of the family members interviewed was present at the scene of the incident. Detectives have gotten a warrant for Joe's arrest. After 3 months, with no sign of Little D, he turns himself in. "Man, do you know what we are here to talk about?" a detective asked. "Yes, sir," Ernesto Fox replied. "Do you wish to talk to me right now?" the detective asked him again. "I don't wish to another any questions now," he replied. "I got this lawyer that you can call," the detective told Little D. "All right," Little D replied. Outro. Ernesto Fox was charged with murder, and he is awaiting trial. Criminal charges are often dropped or reduced, and the suspect is presumed innocent until proven guilty by a court of competent jurisdiction. 2 years after Joe's death, family and friends gathered at his graveyard to celebrate his 48 years birthday. They dropped flowers at his gravesite in remembrance of him. Back to Tulsa murder of Mary, Detective Ronnie meets her estranged husband, Ella Roach, to tell him how Mary ended up dead. Detective Ronnie: "How did it happen?" "It just went off," Roach replied. Detective Ronnie: "What type of gun was it?" Roach: "3ED." Detective Ronnie: "How did the gun just go off?" Roach said he kicked the table while he was arguing with the deceased, which made his gun go off. He said he was just a mad dog. He said everybody knows he and Mary argue all the time. Detective Ronnie: "So what happened after the gun went off?" He said firstly he knew she was shot. Then he realized she was not breathing. He said blood started coming out and she was kept on saying something that he couldn't put together. He said when she started losing a lot of blood, he quickly drove her to the hospital. Detective Ronnie: "What happened when you got to the hospital?" He said she was still feeling hurt. He said he went around the other side of the car and he took her out of the car. Detective Ronnie: "Where did you later drop her?" "Parking lot," Roach replied. Detective Ronnie appreciated Ronnie for turning himself in and talking to him, but he finds it difficult to believe that his gun went off because he kicked a table. Outro. Ellie Len Roach was charged with murder, and he is awaiting trial. Criminal charges are often dropped or reduced, and the suspect is presumed innocent until proven guilty. 12:27 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 911 operators received a call from an unknown caller. 911 operator: "Do you need police, fire, or medical?" Caller: "Somebody just got shot." 911 operator: "Where's the person that shot him?" Caller: "I don't know. I was driving and I just heard the shot and I heard him scream. And I looked and I saw him lying there. He's lying on the ground and there's blood everywhere. He's naked." 911 operator: "Okay, let me get you connected with the MSA." Detectives immediately rushed to the scene of the incident. They met a dead body lying on the ground just as the caller said. 53 years old Michael Binder was born in Chicago and raised in Hawaii. He moved to Tulsa 17 years ago, living for a time with his mother and stepfather. Michael struggled with drug addiction for many years, but he was active in his church and was trying to turn his life around. Michael was struck once in the side of his head. Patrol transported a neighbor and the apartment leasing agent who called 911. While detectives Reggie Warren and Max Ryden continued working on the scene, two other detectives decided to go downtown to conduct interviews. From there, they will go ahead and start digging into the victim's past. Maybe they might get lucky with some information. An hour later, Detective Max Ryden gets a lead after answering a call to the victim's phone. Michael's friend Stuart said Michael planned to meet a woman earlier in the day. Detective Mark told other team members that Detective Max has been answering the victim's phone as it's been ringing. He told them there was someone that called that he's going to meet with that has some information. He said they were going to just get through those witnesses. While Detective White gets started with Michael's neighbor, Detective Leatherman interviews the leasing agent. Detective Ronnie, my name is Ronnie. I'm a detective here. I'll just ask you to tell whatever story you have and we'll go from there. Mike's neighbor, I was in my car and I heard someone screaming help, and then I heard something that sounded like a pop. Then I saw two people running. Detective Ronnie, were they running from the apartment where the shooting happened? Mike's neighbor, yeah. I saw them just driving by. Then I saw his body, so I parked my car and got out to see if he is okay because I knew who he was. Detective Ronnie, okay. Mike's neighbor, I saw his body there and I didn't know how to react. Detective Ronnie, can you describe the people you saw running as best as you can? Mike's neighbor, honestly, I saw just two white people. One of them had blonde hair. It may be down or up. It was kind of long, so it was a female. Mike's neighbor, yeah. The other guy is a white man, I think. I didn't see their faces. Detective Ronnie, have you noticed them out there before? Mike's neighbor, no. Detective Ronnie, have you had any struggles with him? Mike's neighbor, no, not with him. He is really quiet. I remember he was just trying to get his life together. I know he had a past with drugs because I did his background check, but he was not violent. He was all about peace. Next door, Detective Mark is ready to interrogate another neighbor of Mike. She said she parked outside his apartment moments before the shooting. Detective Mark, all right, so just tell me what happened. Mike's neighbor, I saw a guy and a woman going towards that apartment. They knocked and they went in. About 30 seconds later, I heard the guy yelling for help. After that, the gun went off. After that, they ran off. Detective Mark, were they white or black? Mike's neighbor, both are white. The male has a beard and short hair. The female has blonde hair. Detective Mark, okay. Mike's neighbor, both of them were very skinny. Detective, maybe they used drugs kind of skinny. Mike's neighbor, yeah. Detective Ryden returns from speaking with Michael's friend. Detective Ronnie came out of the interrogation room to address other officers. He said both witnesses described the suspects as a white male and a female with blonde hair. He said other than that they couldn't give any additional identifiers. Detective Ryden returns from speaking with Michael's friend. He said the victim was in some program where he gets help getting an apartment and a job and stuffs like that. He said the guy he just talked to known as Stuart said he's back into selling meth. He said it looks like he would have lots of girls over there doing drugs. He said Stuart was with him all night. He said a little after 4 a.m., he went to his house, and he said while he was there, he was going to re-up with his plug. Michael gave Stuart the name of the woman that supplied him with drugs. He said he was supposed to re-up for 4 to 5 ounces. Michael told Stuart that he was afraid of her. He said he left around 5:30 a.m., and the plug had still not gotten there. The detective said they need to have access to Michael's phone. Michael's phone received several Facebook message alerts. Unfortunately, there is a lock pattern on Michael's phone. The team hopes to find out if Michael was in contact with his supplier. Detective White has to wait to get Michael's phone records and Facebook Messenger history because of the lock pattern on Michael's phone. Detective Ryden notified Michael's mother and stepfather. His parents said he is the most non-violent person you will ever meet. They said he will rather give someone his money than fight over it. His parents have lost 2 sons in the last 2 years over drug issues. Detective Mark, hey, what did you find out? Tell me you have some videos. Detective Reggie, no. The apartment complex building has one surveillance camera that doesn't work. The detectives were shocked that the camera could not capture anything in broad daylight. Detective Mark said he will revisit the area. Maybe some witnesses may come up and start talking to him. 20 hours in, a detective said he will make a flyer that he will rake to the complex. He said some of the people over there might have a camera in their residence, and he will like to have a bunch of it to be able to hand out with his phone number on it. And he will also be able to put the word out that they are looking for some information. Another detective said they should take the victim's phone along so that if anybody calls, they will have his contact right away. Detective White drove back to the scene of the incident to see if he could find some witnesses he could talk to. As soon as he alighted from his car, he saw a young man walking and he approached him. Detective White, I'm working on this homicide that happened yesterday. Witness, I heard the shot. Detective White, did you see anybody run after you heard the shot? Witness, no sir, I did not. Detective White, I'm going to give you this flyer. My number is there. If you hear anything, let me know. While surveying the crime scene, Detective Mark saw an apartment that has a camera. He immediately rushed down to the apartment. Detective Mark, hey there, I noticed you have a camera. House owner, I do. And unfortunately, my internet was shut off. Detective White, okay well, disappointing. But thank you. While Detective White entered his car and he was about to move, a call came through the deceased phone. Detective White, my name is Detective White. I noticed that you've been calling Mike's phone. Had you heard what happened to Mike? Caller, I heard the news this morning and I was afraid it might be him. Detective White, yeah, it's him. How well do you know him? Caller, I was homeless at one time and I stayed with him for a while. Detective White, where are you at now? Maybe I can holler at you and you might be able to help me out. Caller, I was headed over to his place to see if he was there. Detective White, I'll be right across his apartment. Okay. After some few minutes, the caller arrived and Detective White allowed her into his car. Detective White, I am sorry you are going through this. Caller, he was a good person. Detective White, honestly, I have not heard from one person that he was a bad guy. What has he been up to? Caller, I don't know. I know he has talked about how he has been ripped off a couple of times. Detective White, okay. Did he tell you how long ago he got robbed? Caller, probably a month ago. Detective White, did he give you any of the details? Caller, he said a woman ripped him off. Detective White, do you know who she is? Caller, no, I do not. Detective White, I know he was selling meth, but do you know who he was supplied by? Caller, no, I don't. I want to know who did this. Detective White, I do too, and he's got some nice parents that are devastated. As the first 48 hours wind down, Detective White updates Mike's father. He told him he hoped was that people would have started calling him, but that has not happened yet. He said they were not going to stop and they will continue to work with everything they have. Mike's father said that sounds great and he appreciates the efforts of the detectives. In the first 48 hours, Tulsa Homicide responded to the shooting death of 53-year-old Michael Binder. They learned that a white and a blonde woman were seen fleeing his apartment. They also heard that Michael may have returned to selling drugs and planned to meet a supplier on the day he was murdered. They got a warrant to search Michael's phone and Facebook page. They have searched for witnesses at Michael's apartment complex, but have come up empty. The next day, someone called Detective White's phone and left a message. Detective White played the voice note for Detective Ronnie So. The caller said he wanted to remain anonymous, but he has some information about the shooting in Tulsa. He said he knows the girl and she told him what happened in detail last night. He left a phone number that Detective White can use to get to them. Let me try to call it, Detective White told Detective Ronnie. Detective White called him and he agreed to meet with him. Detective White and Detective Ronnie headed to the meeting point where they agreed to meet with the tipster. The tipster said Michael's supplier is staying at a nearby motel. 4 days after Michael's murder, the warrants team sets up surveillance on the supplier's motel room. A few minutes later, a car drove to the door of the supplier. A white male with a gray t-shirt came down from the car and knocked on the door of the room. He was let in by someone who the detectives were not able to identify then. A few minutes later, the white guy came out of the room with a female loading the stuff off. They both entered the vehicle and started driving. The detectives tracked down their car and arrested them. They and the detectives headed back to homicide. Immediately they arrived at the homicide. Both of them were taken into a separate room for questioning. Detective White and Detective Zanoni entered the investigation room, where the white female was been held. "Hello, my name is Detective Jason White, and this is Detective Zanoni over here," he said. "I'm working on a murder. That's what we do." He said they know sometimes in these investigations, people do stupid things. Female suspect. "Yeah, I see where you are going with your investigation. I was in his house. When I left him, he was completely fine." Detective White. "Let's stop. Whose apartment did you go to?" Female suspect. "Mike." Detective White. "The day he got murdered." Female suspect. "Yeah, that day." Detective White. "What time were you over there?" Female suspect. "It was 7:50 a.m." Detective White. "Did you ever go back in that apartment that day?" Female suspect. "No, not at all." Detective White. "You went over there with whom?" Female suspect. "With a man and another woman." Detective White. "Why did you go over there?" Female suspect. "He wanted me to come over there and see him." Detective White. "For what?" Female suspect. "Just go and visit him." Detective White. "Here is the decision that you have to make. Either you want to go down the road of I want to savage my life and I want to have a life, or you want to go down with somebody else potentially for the rest of your life." He said he doesn't think they had any issues other than he was a little bit behind on his. She interjected by saying he didn't owe her any money. She said he didn't owe her a single dime. Detective White told her she will go to jail for murder. She interjected in a sober mood saying she had no idea who killed the victim. Detective White asked her where she was. She said after she left Michael's apartment, she and her friends spent the afternoon at a flea market. Detective White. "If anybody tells me that you are going to confess you were there, then that is a flat-out lie." Female suspect. "Absolutely, it is a lie." Detective White. "Do you have any objections to us looking at your phone?" Female suspect. "Yeah, you can look." Detective White. "All right. Sit tight and be patient." Detectives started going through her phone. They found a text between her and the friend she said she met up with around the time Michael was murdered. The text corroborates her alibi. Detectives discovered the information they got from the tipster was not correct. They know it's frustrating, but they had no other option than to release the two suspects. 2 weeks later, Michael's Facebook Messenger records finally came in. Detectives found a series of messages between him and his female. The name of the female is Lena Rocher. The messages were sent before the homicide happened. The conversations were like hanging out. There was somewhere in the conversation where the victim told his female friend that he was going to give her 2 zips if she makes it to his apartment within an hour. Detective Mike asked Detective Ronnie what a zip means after he read that part of the message. Detective Ronnie told him a zip means an ounce. Lena arrived at Michael's complex 30 minutes before his murder. Detectives were able to get her picture and her location through the Facebook Messenger chat. They got to know that she is a blonde-haired lady who lives in Sapulpa. Detective White immediately called the Sapulpa PD for a background check on Lena. The Sapulpa PD told detectives that she has some stuff on her. He said she had no prior felony convictions, but she is a person of interest in a missing firearm investigation. The Sapulpa PD told Tulsa detectives that Lena could be wrapped up tonight if they want it done. Tulsa detectives told him that will be great. Detective White told them he will be more than happy to come to them. An hour later, Sapulpa PD brings in Lena. Detective White and Detective Ronnie made their way to the Sapulpa police station to try and talk to Lena and see what she has to say. Detective White and Detective Ronnie made their way to the interrogation room as soon as they arrived at the police station. Detective White. "Hello, young lady. I do not know the reason why they brought you here, but I wanted to talk to you about something else. Do you know how to read and write?" Lena. "Yes." Detective White. "And you read what is on my shirt and it says homicide?" Lena. "Yes." Detective White. "Do you have any idea why I want to speak with you?" Lena. "Yeah, honestly, yeah." Michael Binder. Detective White. "Yep. Lena, he was my friend. I helped him once. They wanted me to go over there so they can just take his grocery home." Detective White. "Okay, who are they?" Lena. "Nicholas Gibson and Ruthie Blair." Detective White. "How do you these guys?" Lena. "Through Samuel Washington." Detective White. "How did you guys end up over there?" Lena. "Honestly, I was supposed to be getting in some stuff. Meth. And they wanted to try to take his stuff from him." Detective White. "Tell me what went down when you got to the apartments." Lena. "I knocked on the door and he let me in. And then I went in the bathroom, which is where I was when they came in. Detective White, did you intentionally leave the door open or unlocked? Lena, yeah, I left the door unlocked. Detective White, okay, knowing that they were going to come behind you. Lena, yes. Detective White, did they come inside the apartment on their own? Lena, yeah. I came out because I heard all the noise and they told me to get on the fucking floor. Those were their exact words. He got up and took off running. He went to the door and started shouting for help. I heard a bang. Detective Ronnie, who's the one that pulled the trigger? Lena, Nicholas Gibson. Detective White, and then, what did you guys do? Lena, fled. She said they fled in a car that she parked nearby. Detective White, what is the discussion in the car after you left? Lena, I'm just told that if I throw them under the bus, basically the same thing will happen to me. Detective White, let me go through this again. Just correct me if I am wrong. You went inside by yourself. How was he dressed? Liana, he was fully dressed. And then I went in the bathroom, which is where I was when they came in, and he had got down into a towel, I guess. Detective White, was there anything that was supposed to go on? Lena, oh yeah. He talked about trying to have sex with me and stuff. Detective Ronnie, why did you want to take his stuff, and how did you know about him? Lena, because they had me get them stuff before. Detective White, from him. Lena, yeah. She claims Nicholas and Ruth had her get drugs for Michael in the past. Detective White, are there phone numbers in your phone? Lena, possibly. Nicholas's number should be in there for sure. Detective White, all right, give me a few minutes. Detective White and Detective Ronnie left the interrogation room. Detective Ronnie said Lena will be charged with felony murder. He said that we'll start working towards getting an arrest warrant for both of her accomplices. Both Nicholas and Ruth have prior convictions for burglary. Detective White said their efforts would now be to find both Nicholas and Ruth and bring them in safely. 4 days later, Detective White gets a lead. He got a tip about Samuel Washington's investigation. The tipster stated that Michael and Lena have had some sort of relationship. White said the way he is hearing it is that he potentially directed Lena to do the robbery. An hour later, Detective White brought Lena back to homicide. Detective White, you already went out on a limb and told me everything as far. Liana, yeah. Detective White, I'll just get to the parts that I'm wanting to shore up. Who did you tell about this situation? Lena, my mom, of course. Detective White, anybody else? Lena, that's the only other person I mentioned it or talked to about it. Detective White, did you make a phone call right after this happened or talk to anybody? Lena, I had somebody call me. Detective White, who? Lena, Samuel Washington. Detective White, this guy right, while showing her his picture. I am not going to waste anybody's time here. Do you have a relationship with him? Lena, he was my boyfriend. Detective White, so that is what I am getting at. I do not want you to sit there and protect that guy. Liana, no, I am not trying to protect anybody. He has told me to do things that I... Detective White, okay, let's get into that. Tell me exactly what he told you to do. Liana, to do whatever it takes to get the money to bond him out. Lena claims Samuel wanted her help to get out of jail. So, he hatched a plan. He planned that Liana would rob Mike. He wanted her to set it up for Nick and Ruthie to go do it. Okay, give me a quick minute, Detective White said while he and Detective Ronnie left the interrogation room. He asked Detective Ronnie what he found. Detective Ronnie said he is looking at murder and conspiracy to commit a felony. Detectives decided to have Samuel transported from jail for questioning. Later that day, Samuel was brought to homicide. He was taken into an interrogation room for questioning. Detective White, first of all, my name is Jason White. I am a homicide detective. You had said something that you want to clear your conscience when we were in the car coming down here. Isn't that right, Samuel? Yeah. Detective White, what do you want to clear your conscience about? Samuel, I talked to Annie. Detective White, you referred to her as Annie when we are talking about Lena. Samuel, when I was in jail, I called her and she answered the phone. Her first words were everything went bad. And she said, he's gone. I said, who's gone? And she said money or Mike or something. This guy Mike, if I remember, she knew him from the past, and she admits she wants me for about getting him. Detective White, what does that mean? Samuel, rob him. That was way before I was even in jail. I told her Ruthie and Nick usually do stuff like that. Detective White, so you guys have had some discussions about possibly the robbery before you were arrested. You ended up getting incarcerated. Were there any other calls that made or any discussion between the two of you or her about wanting to rob him? Samuel, it was pretty much. If she still wanted to do that with Nick, he could help her. He said after they got locked up, he told Lena to work with Nick on a plan targeting Michael. Detective White, okay, meaning the robbery. Samuel, yeah, robbery. I didn't know anything about any murder. Detective White, you may be in a little bit of trouble. If you hadn't mentioned something to her about that situation, that guy would be alive, you know. Samuel, if I get charged, what would I be charged with? Detective White, it will be with murder. Probably a felony murder. Based on the kind of putting the wheels in motion, and then somebody dying in the midst of that, it becomes felony murder. Do you see what I am saying? Samuel, yeah, okay. Detective White, I will holler at you in a quick minute. 2 months after Michael's murder, detectives got a call in the morning that Missouri authorities were able to get Ruth Blair into custody. A tipster called and said both of them were at a house that was nearby. Officers went there really quickly and they managed to capture her, but they didn't find him. Detective White and Detective Ronnie went to Missouri to question here. Detective White, hey there, young lady. Ruth, hi. Detective White, are you doing all right? Ruth, yes. I was scary. Detective White, yes, I know, and you know what? This is a scary situation. But you have to tell me what's up. I already know what's up, but I need to hear from you. Ruth, all I know is Leanne has been texting and calling my old man for a week or two. She had this master plan to go over there because he was supposed to have a lot of money. And Nick asked for a rundown. Like, what's the deal? She said she will go and then the rest can come in. She said to pull into the actual complex. Lena went in by herself and she left the door unlocked. Ruth said she was behind Nick. Nick went in first and he opened the door and she shut the door. Detective White, what was said at this point? Ruth, he said put your hands up. So the dude jumps out and he got a sheet wrapped around him. He walks right in front of Nick and it all happened so fast. Before you knew it, he's got his hand on the doorknob. Nick said don't do it, don't do it. So the dude swings the door open and run out and yelled for help. And then Nick went to pistol whip him. He just wanted to hit him with it. When he went to him the first time, his finger slipped, and the gun went off. Detective White, what did the three of you do next? Ruth, he and I ran out. Went and got in the Jeep. It took her a little longer to come out because she was rounding off everything she could find. She said Lena grabbed drugs from Michael's apartment before fleeing. She said Lena and her didn't get the wallet and the wallet was the goal. Detective White, did you ever see her again? Ruth, no. Detective White, did Nick? Ruth, no. She said she and Nick went their separate ways. She said she was so afraid she was not going to see him again. The next day, Detective White gets an update from Springfield PD. They finally located Nicholas Gibson. Nicholas Gibson was charged with felony murder in the first degree, and he is awaiting trial. Ruth Blair was charged with felony murder in the first degree and she is awaiting trial. Lena Rocher was charged with felony murder in the first degree and she is awaiting trial. Samuel Washington was charged with felony murder in the first degree and he is awaiting trial. Criminal charges are often dropped or reduced and the suspects are presumed innocent until proven guilty. A young man was shot dead while at home with his cousin. They had to shoot from the outside. Detectives are tracking an elusive suspect, but he is always one step ahead, and the clock is ticking. For homicide detectives, their chance of solving a murder is cut in half if they don't get a lead within the first 48 hours. 8:30 a.m. in Mobile, Alabama, a caller put a call through to 911. When the operator picks the call, he asks the caller the location of her emergency. The caller said Dexter Avenue. The caller told the 911 operator to send emergency very quickly because the victim was still breathing. The operator told her that officers will be on their way immediately. He said he needed to know what happened exactly. The caller said she doesn't know what happened. She said she just heard shots ringing out of nowhere and the victim got hit. The operator asked her where she and the victim are. A man close to the woman told the 911 operator to send in help very quickly because the woman is still breathing. 911 operators said he is going to send help right away. The man told the operator to hurry up. He asked if the person that shot the victim was still nearby. They said they do not know. When the medical emergency unit arrived at the scene of the incident, they transported the victim to the hospital, but he died while in the car. The victim is a 23 years old Junta Davis who grew up in Mobile and worked for FedEx. He leaves behind his mother, sister, girlfriend, and young daughter. Junta Davis was shot twice in his chest, once in each arm, and his back. In the bedroom where Junta was found, there were 4 spent .380 shell casings. Junta's cell phone was on the floor of the living room. Pre-packaged packs of marijuana were also found in the front door. Junta's cousin Michael and his roommate who were inside when the shooting happened have agreed to talk when they get to homicide. Junta's cousin Michael was babysitting when the shooting took place. A detective said when he entered the room, he saw the babies were soaked in blood. Another detective asked where the baby was. Patrol officers said they allowed a friend of Michael to take away the baby from the scene of the incident. A detective who was among the first respondents narrated what the witness told him. The detective said they told him no one came into the house. He said they heard the shooting from outside, but they found a casing in the room. An officer said what the witnesses believed was that somebody came on the side of the house and shoot into the house. Detectives also noticed several bullet holes in the building. A detective asked for the exact room where the victim was shot to ascertain if there was a bullet hole there too. When he was taken there, he saw a bullet hole. He dipped his hand into it to see if he could find a bullet. While on the scene, Detective Barton was notified through a call that Detective Jeremy was at the hospital with Junta's family. Detective Barton asked the caller if the family have gotten the news of Junta's death. The caller replied in the affirmative. The family has no idea who would want Junta dead. Detective Barton turns to Junta's neighbors. He knocked on the door of one of Junta's neighbors. The neighbor came out looking surprised to find detectives in front of his door. Detective Barton asked him if he heard any gunshot while he was in his room. He said he didn't hear gunshots. He said the only thing he has seen is police cars in front of his apartment. Detective Barton moved to the door of the next neighbor, but the neighbor was not in his apartment. Detective Barton said he and Detective Nettles will interview the 2 witnesses. He said they will have to take the statement of the 2 witnesses and see if their statements corroborate the evidence that they have. A few hours later, both witnesses were brought to homicide. They were taken into separate interrogation rooms immediately. Detective Barton and Detective Nettles went to the interrogation room where the first witness was being held. They both introduced themselves when they entered. Detective Barton asked the witness where he is living currently. He said he lives at Dexter Avenue. He said he moved in there about 1 or 2 months ago. Detective Barton asked him how long Junta has been living in that house. He said he think 9 or 10 years. Detective Barton asked him who Junta is to him. He said he will call Junta his brother. Detective Barton told the witness what he was doing and what he remembered around the time that the shooting occurred. The witness said he went to bed at midnight. He said everybody was in the room because the 3 of them stayed in the room together. He said he was in the right bed close to the door. He said Junta slept on the sofa while Michael slept on the other bed. Detective Barton asked about the kid. The witness said the kid slept on the bed with Mike. He said he woke up when he heard all the gunshots. He said woke up, he looked up and saw Junta falling. He said while Junta was falling, that was when Michael ran in and started asking what was going on. He said Michael carried the baby and was yelling at him to call the police. He said as he was calling the police, he heard a car speed away. He said the front door to the house was wide open. Detective Barton asked him if he saw the person that did the shooting. He said he did not see the person. Detective Barton asked him how the gunshot was fired. He asked him if the gunshot sounded like it was in the room with him or not. He said the gunshot sounded very close. Detective Barton asked the witness if it was possible that the shooter was in the room and he didn't see the shooter. He said it's possible. Detective Nettles asked him if he knows the status of Junta presently. He said he doesn't know Junta's status presently, but he will want to know. Detective Nettles told him that Junta is dead, which means both of them are in a serious situation at the moment. Detective Barton told the witness that they think he has been truthful with them since the beginning of the interrogation, but they know without a shadow of a doubt that he has not told them everything he knows. Detective Barton asked him if there was anything else that happened in the house that he has not told them. He said he is specifically referring to the shell casing they found inside the bedroom. The witness said Michael does shoot out the window sometimes. He shoots out the window on the ground outside and in the backyard. Detective Barton asked him why Michael does that. He said Michael does that to know if it worked properly. Detective Nettles asked him when Michael shot out the window. He said that was about 2 days ago. Detective Barton asked him the type of gun that Michael uses. He said Michael had shot with .38, 380, or whatever it was. Detective Nettles asked him if the shell casings that are in the room are from Michael's gun. He said that is his guess. Detective Barton asked if Michael has any other pistols at home. He said all he knows is a shotgun. He said when he sees the shotgun, it used to be by the TV stand. The two detectives left the interrogation and they moved to where Michael was being held. When they entered the room where Michael was being held, Detective Barton introduced himself and introduced Detective Nettles too. Detective Barton asked Michael whether he saw the person that fired the shots. Michael said he did not. He asked him if he believed that Michael was shot inside or outside of the house. He said he believes Michael was shot from the outside. Detective Barton told Michael that they found shell casings by the side of his room. Michael said he had a .380. He said he shot at the window a few days ago. Detective Michael asked him what he was doing. He said he was testing it. Detective Barton said it looks weird to him that he chose the out of a window of all places to test his gun. Michael said he chose it because he was nervous if he walks outside, police were going to walk by and they will see him shooting a doggone gun. Michael said he has gotten rid of the gun because he has sold it to his big dog who lives in Mayville. Detective Barton asked Michael if he would be able to get them back because they need to match it. Michael said he can get it back. Detective Barton told Michael he wants to know what has been going on regarding Junta. Michael said nobody comes on a Sunday morning and kills another person without a reason. Michael said Junta had some fake 20 seconds from one of his homeboys. He said Michael has been telling them that he is fixing to try to get a whole zip of Reggie. He said 3 days ago, Junta wanted to buy some low-grade marijuana or Reggie suing counterfeit $20 bills. Detective Barton asked Michael if he knows the person Junta was trying to pass those 20 seconds to. He said he was trying to pass it to a guy who has Haitian dreads. He said that's the only person he thinks might be mad at Junta. The team searches Junta's contacts on social media. They checked for anyone matching the suspect's description. While the detectives were checking Junta's contact, his mother reaches out to Detective Barton through a phone call. Detective Barton, after consoling her, asked her about the last time she spoke to her son. She said she spoke to him about a week ago. She said the conversation they had was just a regular conversation. Detective Barton asked her whether any of Junta's friends has reached her or had offered her any sort of idea of what happened or anything. She said no one has reached out to her. Detective Barton told Junta's mother to call him if she has any questions. He said he will call her also when he gets new information. A detective said there is nothing more they can do that night. Detective Barton addressed the detectives. He told them they will regroup the next day and they will try to figure out if they can find the guy that Dunta was trying to buy weed from. The next afternoon, an anonymous tipster called in about the murder. The tipster said that around 8 last night, his friend called him and asked him whether he knows that T has been killed. He said he told him he had no idea. He said the guy that shot Dunta came to his house right after he shot Dunta and tried to give him the gun and some drugs. He said the guy was bragging about shooting T. The tipster said his friend T was killed by a guy known as Michael. He said the killer is fat and has a beard. He said the shooter may be somehow related to Dunetta's family. Detective Barton said was that, as he was getting that information from the tipster, he also got a call from Birch. Birch's father, Paul Birch, is a captain in the mobile sheriff's office. He said Birch also said the shooter's name was Michael and the shooter was possibly related to Dunta. He said after the shooting, Michael fled to a family compound. He said Birch didn't give the address, but he said the whole compound was surrounded by a big privacy fence with a barbed wire. Detective Nettles said the only issue with Birch's information would be that the suspect fled to a family house in Plateau. He said they had Michael at the headquarters after the shooting. He said he is not saying that Michael was the shooter. What he was trying to say is that some information might have crossed the line. A few minutes later, Detective Barton's tipster gave an address for the shooter who heard the confession. The detectives left the headquarters immediately to see if they can find the suspect at the address the tipster gave. When they got there, they knocked on the door and the homeowner came out. The homeowner told the detectives that the witness was not there. The detectives asked the homeowner if he can help them contact the witness. The homeowner said he doesn't know where he is. He said the witness doesn't have a phone. The detectives asked the homeowner if the witness stays with him. He said the witness doesn't stay with him. He told the detectives that the witness lives at his relative's house just around the corner. The detectives went to the house the homeowner showed them. When they got here, they knocked on the door and a guy responded. They asked him if he has seen the witness. He said he hasn't seen him. They asked him if the witness usually comes there every day. He said not often. They told the guy that they needed to talk to the witness and if he gets in contact with him, he should give them a call. The detectives decided to check Plateau since Birch said he went to Plateau. Plateau, also known as Africatown, is a historic community founded by former slaves in the north section of Mobile. Detectives drove to the Plateau in search of him. They kept checking for a house with a compound and a wired fence. They passed through many houses before they finally saw a house that has a compound and wired fence. One of the detectives pointed at the house, saying the house might be the house they have been looking for. A woman in the house said she has been having trouble with her nephew and gives detectives his name. She said he sells drugs and rides around with a gun. She said he is just a bad apple. She said he was going to get his brother into big trouble. Detective Barton asked her the name of his brother. She said his name is Michael. The detectives asked Michael's brother to describe him. He said Michael is 30 years old. He is heavyset and he wears a beard. The detectives asked him if he has Michael's phone number. He said yes, and he gave the detectives Michael's number. The detectives thanked them and left. Detective Barton said they should return to headquarters so that they can put it together since they now have a suspect. Their possible suspect, Michael, has no prior conviction. Detectives searched for any communication between Dunta and Michael, but they did not find any information. In the first 48, Mobile Homicide responded to the murder of 23 years old Dunta Davis. They discovered that his roommate and his cousin were at home during the shooting, but didn't get a look at the shooter. Detectives received anonymous tips that the shooter is named Michael and that he fled to a family compound after the murder. Someone in the compound identified Michael but does not believe he was involved in the shooting. The next morning, the witness that overheard the witness confession finally comes forward. He was taken into the interrogation room. After some few minutes, Detective Barton and Detective Nettles went to the room where he was being held. Detective Barton introduced himself to the witness and said he appreciated the witness for coming to homicide. Detective Barton asked him if he has any idea why he was invited. He said he knows Dunta by the nickname Shaq. Detective Barton asked him if he knows anything at all about the situation. He said he saw policemen outside his home. He said he didn't know what was going on. He said he came down there because of the presence of the policemen. He says on the morning of the murder, he went to check if Dunta was okay. He said he saw a baby. He said he told him not to let them go out at all. He said he carried the baby and the baby's little bag. Detective Barton asked him where he got the baby's bag from. He said he got it from the fat dude called Mike. He said when he walked past 3 houses down, a girl pulled up in a gray car and got the baby and the bag. He said they told him there was a gun in the bag. Detective Nettles asked him how he heard that there was a gun in the baby's bag. He said he heard it from people in the hood. Detective Nettles said how people in the hood could know there was a gun in the bag. He said they knew because they often hang with the victim and his friends. Detective Barton asked that how was the situation where out of all the people that were out there, why was he the one Michael came to? He said that was because he was the first person outside at that time. Detective Barton asked him what type of Camry was it. He said it was a gray Camry. He asked him if he has ever seen the Camry before. He said he has never seen the Camry. Detective Barton asked the victim what he thinks happened in the building. He said he believes that Dunta's cousin or roommate shot Dunta. The detective said they have to verify the information. Detective Barton asked another detective if he can pull up the body cam. The detective pulls up body cam footage from first responders to the shooting. The footage shows Michael Montgomery asking officers if he can retrieve a pair of pants from his bedroom. The footage showed how Mike picked a gun and shoots the victim. Detective Barton arranges an interview with Dunta's roommate, who is in jail on an unrelated warrant. After some few minutes, Detective Barton and Detective Nettles left the headquarters to meet Mike's roommate. A few minutes later, they arrived at their location. They knocked and they were let in. They asked him if he has any idea why they are there. He said he has no idea. They said they came to his place because they wanted to allow him to tell the truth. They said they knew that it was not a situation where he was asleep and had no idea of what happened inside the house. They said he should tell them what he did not tell them in the morning. They told him that he left something out and he has to understand that what they are investigating is a murder case. They told him he has to think about his future and what he is going to do for the rest of his life. Detective asked him one more time to tell him what happened in the house. He said when he woke up that morning, they were arguing. He said Mike had bought some weed from somebody and it was a weak weed. He said Dunta, who goes by the nickname Dee Dee, was hassling about the weed. He said Dee Dee disrespected Mike and Michael did it back. He said Dee Dee got mad and he pushed Michael, but Michael pushed him back. He said he guessed Mike pushed Dee Dee a little too hard. He said when Michael pushed Dee Dee grabbed the shotgun and he told Michael he was going to shoot him. He said Mike grabbed his .380 guns too. He said Dee Dee was asking Michael if he was going to shoot him for real. At that point, Dee Dee cocked his gun. He said Michael started shooting immediately. Dee Dee cocked his gun. Detective Barton asked how many times Michael shot Dunta. He said Michael shot him 4 or 5 times. Detective Barton asked him the whereabouts of the shotgun and the .380. He said the shotgun is in the house, but he doesn't know what happened to the .380. Detective Barton asked him why he did not tell them initially, and he said he doesn't know. They asked him if he has anything to say, and he said he has nothing more to say. 189 years old Michael Montgomery has no prior convictions. The next night, the detectives got information on the possible whereabouts of Mike. They got information that Mike is staying in a relative's house in nearby Pritchard. The team leave the headquarters that night and headed to Mike's location. When the team arrived at the apartment, they knocked on the door. A woman came out to speak to the detectives. They asked her if Michael was there. She was hesitant and not willing to talk. The detectives kept asking her because they detected through her body gesture that Mike might be there. During that process, a detective sighted Mike in the apartment and told him to come out with his hand on his head. Mike finally came out and he was taken into custody by the detectives. They took him to the interrogation room as soon as they arrived at homicide. Detective Barton went where Mike was being held and asked him if he would like to talk to him. He told Detective Barton that he will talk to him if he wants him to talk. Detective Barton told him he wants to know what happened to Dunta. He said when he got up, he went into the bathroom and closed the door. A few seconds later, he started hearing the gunshot. He said he immediately grabbed his baby and ran out of the bathroom door. He said all he saw when he came out was Dee falling to the floor. He said the police showed up after that, and that was what happened. At that point, Detective Barton raised his voice on Mike. He told Mike that what he has been telling them is not the truth. He said he knew that because Mike was not the only one leaving with the deceased. He said the evidence that they have dictates that Mike is not telling the truth. He told Mike that he was ready to give him one last chance to say the truth. Mike also got upset. He told Detective Barton that he was not going to say anything. He says he will rather remain quiet. When he said that, Detective Barton and Detective Nettles left the interrogation room. When Mike left the room, he immediately put a call through to the DOAS office to present his case. He said he wants to know if there is enough evidence to arrest Michael Montgomery for murder. When he dropped the call, he came to where his other team members are. He told them that they have sufficient evidence to charge Michael Montgomery for the murder of Dunta. Detective Barton and Detective Nettles returned to the interrogation room where Mike was being held and officially arrested him for the murder of Dunta Davis. The shotgun and the .380 were never recovered. No one else was charged in connection with the case. Detective Barton put a call through to Dunta's mother, Miss Ottery, and told her that they have arrested Michael Montgomery for the murder of her son. 8:58 p.m. in Mobile, Alabama. A woman put a call across to 911 operatives. As soon as the 911 operative answered the call, she asked about the woman's emergency. The woman said she needs the police right there in Mobile Terrace. The operative asked the woman for her address. The 911 operative heard the woman asking the name of the street from someone else. The caller got the name of the street from the person. She told the 911 operative that the street is Claude Harris Drive. She told the operative that someone just shot her son. The 911 operative asked the woman whether her son was still conscious. The caller told the 911 operative that her son is dead 3 times. She said someone has just killed her son. When the first respondents arrived, they found the mother and her sister outside. When they entered the house, they found 2 men in the living room who riddled with bullets. The first respondents said they are going to need homicide to respond to the case. The victim found on the couch is 37 years old Nelson Bedgood, known as Ray. He was born and raised in Mobile. He was the founder and chief executive officer of a local van production company. Ray leaves behind his wife and 3 daughters. Ray was shot 6 times, 3 times in the head and once in the shoulder, chest, and arm. The second victim is 41 years old guy known as Blue, was also born and raised in Mobile and recently quit his job as a cook in a local restaurant to start a landscaping business. Blue leaves behind 4 children, his mother, and 2 sisters. Blue was shot 5 times, 3 times in the head, once in the arm, and once in the back. Detective Jeremy asked CPL Nick Crepeau whether they have talked to any of the neighbors. The officer said one of the neighbors he interviewed said they heard several gunshots around 8:45 p.m., which was exactly 10 minutes before the 911 call. He said the neighbor thinks it was two different guns just by the sound. Detective Jeremy asked one of the officers if she thinks the deceased returned fire. The officer said she doesn't think so. The team collects a phone found next to Ray's body. They also found a small piece of cracked cocaine in Ray's front pocket and bloodstains in the kitchen. One of the officers said it's obvious that the deceased have been cooking crack. CPL Jermaine Rogers knows Blue from growing up in the neighborhood. He said Blue served 8 years sentence for intention to distribute cracked cocaine. He said Blue was released 4 years ago. Detective Begg spoke to Blue's mom and sister who discovered the bodies. Detective Begg said he knew she has gone through a lot. She said she doesn't know why they did her baby like that. Detective Begg said he doesn't know where to start. He said he wants her to tell him what brought her to the victim's apartment at that time of the day. She said she has been calling and he didn't answer the phone. Detective Begg asked if that was why she came. She said she is his mother. She said he answers the phone anytime she calls him. Detective Begg asked her what time she called him. She said she called him around 8:45 p.m. and he didn't answer. She said she then decided to come and see what was going down herself. She said when she arrived, the door was opened. She said she went in and she sat on the sofa trying to shake her son. She said she was telling him to get up. She said she said it twice and she did not see any reaction. She said after that, she saw him in a pool of blood and she started yelling that someone should call the police. Detective Begg asked her whether she knows anybody in the neighborhood that her son might have a beef with anyone. She said yes. She said she is not saying that the person did it, but her son has been having a feud with him. She said he has been threatening her son for a while. Detective Begg asked Blue's mother if she knew the cause of the feud. She said she doesn't know, but it's a long history. She said she doesn't know who did this, but she hopes they are caught and punished. Detective Begg appreciated Blue's mom. He said if she hears anything, she should call him immediately. 2 hours in, one of Blue's relatives comes forward. Detective Begg asked him what was going open. He said one of his good friends said he heard from someone that a girl came to the house with some guys from California. He said he just wanted to let the detectives know about that. He gave Detective Begg the name of the woman that was seen in the house moments before the murder. He said the girl was kind of spook. He said she was just telling him that she was in there when it went down. Detective Begg asked the relative if he knows whether Ray and Blue have any beef with anyone. The relative said he doesn't know if Ray has any beef with someone. Detective Begg asked him about Blue. He said Blue was into something. He mentioned the same man that Blue's mother said was feuding with her son. He said he laid up over there laid up in the bed. He said that man is out of town recovering from an earlier shooting. Detective Begg asked Blue's relative when the man was shot. He said he was shot about a month ago. Detective Begg asked who shot the man. He said he doesn't know. Detective Begg said he appreciates him and he walked away from him. The team watched how the bodies of the deceased were evacuated before they went back to headquarters. When they got to the headquarters, Detective Begg searched Ray's phone hoping to find the number for the woman who was at the house before the murder. With little to go on, the team decided to reach out to the woman. When she answered the phone, Detective Jeremy introduced himself. He asked the woman if there is any way she can come down to their headquarters. She agreed to come. A few hours later, the woman was at the headquarters. As soon as she arrived, she was taken into a room for questioning. Detective Jeremy and another detective went into the room to interrogate the woman. Detective Jeremy told the woman they just wanted to talk to her and see what's going on. Detective Jeremy asked the woman to tell them what happened. She said she knows Blue and Ray very well. She said that was where they all meet and hang out. Detective Jeremy asked the woman that when was the last time she talked to any of them. She said a few hours before the shooting. She said she was at the house watching a playoff game. She said when she first got there, she met only Blue. She said a few minutes later, some dudes came. She said the dudes were from California. She said they walked in with a suitcase. She said Blue told the dudes to take the briefcase to the back of the kitchen. She said she knew that it was like a drug deal. but she didn't ask them any questions. Detective Jeremy asked the woman that who sold drugs between them. She said both of them sell drugs. Detective Jeremy asked the woman about the money that she think Blue and Ray have. She said she has never seen them with a lot of money or a lot of drugs, but she frequently hears it from them. She said they always talk about spending huge money on cocaine. Detective Jeremy asked the woman what did she think happened back there. She said the first thing that came to her mind was the dudes from California did it. She said the dudes were looking for Ray. She said Blue got on the phone and told Ray that the dudes have dropped the package. She said Ray said all right. He told Blue that he was on his way. She said a few minutes later, Ray pulled up and came into the house. She said he had a book bag. Detective Jeremy asked her what she thinks was in the book bag that Ray was carrying. She said she thinks it's weed. Detective Jeremy asked her for the weight. She said it's probably some pounds. She said she never looked inside the bag, but she knew he gave the other dude a pound of weed. She said a third man stopped by and Ray gave him some pound of weed. She said he was in a blue Honda truck. She said she know a lot of people in the area. She said it's weird that she hasn't seen the face of the dude in the Honda truck before. She said another dude was sitting right on the side of Blue. She gave Detective Jeremy the name of the dude that was watching the game with them. She said the dude was supposed to be cooking for them. She said the dude's job is all about the food, not drugs. Detective Jeremy asked the woman if she knows the name of the dude from California. She said she doesn't know their name and Ray and Blue never mentioned their name. She said they came in a white four-door Kia truck-like SUV. She said the driver of the car was a girl. She said the girl never got out of the car for like 4 hours, that the dudes were with Ray and Blue. Detective Jeremy asked the woman if the dudes were white males. She said they were black males. He asked about the female too. The woman said she was black also. She said they were talking about going to New Orleans tonight because the game was today. She said they were like the city was going to have a lot of parties or whatever. Detective Jeremy and his colleague appreciated the woman and they left the interrogation room. They returned to their team members. Detective Jeremy told the team members that the woman provided a lot of insight into what the guys were doing over there. He said it sounded like everything happened because of drugs and the amount of money involved. He said it won't be out of place to say the dudes from California killed Ray and Blue. 11 hours in, Detective Jeremy got a lead from Cyber. A white car matching the description of the one used by the men from California was spotted on neighborhood surveillance cameras 5 hours before the murder. The next day, Detective Jeremy got the name of the woman who rented the white Kia to the dudes. She picked up the car from the airport a day before the murder. Detective Jeremy searched for her on Facebook. A few minutes into his search, he saw a video posted by the woman just 2 hours after the 911 call. Detective Jeremy said it would be a tight time for them to have committed the murder and be right back in the airport at that time. He said they knew the guys from California brought a suitcase full of drugs to the house and dropped it off on the day that Blue and Ray were killed. He said that the timeline rules out them from being the suspects in the murder case. Detective Jeremy said it's a little bit disappointing because when they feel they are making progress and it hits a wall, he said they have to start all over again and pursue another angle. While Detective Jeremy was checking out on the guys from California, the woman who was in the house before the murder reached out. She told Detective Jeremy that everybody in the neighborhood is saying that the guy that was driving the blue Honda was the one that did the shooting. She said the guy that drove the blue Honda was still at the house when everybody left. A witness found out the name of the man in the blue Honda. He has no prior convictions. His older brother, the alleged shooter, has prior convictions for possession of drugs and possession of a controlled substance. As the first 48 hours slip away, the team decides to wait to bring the man in the blue Honda and his brother. In the first 48, Mobile Homicide responded to the murder of Nelson Ray Bedgood and Blue Taylor. They heard from a witness that before the murder, 2 men from California arrived at the victim's house with a suitcase full of drugs. The witness heard rumors that Blue and Ray were been round for the drugs and shot by 2 brothers from the neighborhood, but decided to wait for more evidence before bringing them in for questioning. 17 days into the investigation and desperate to identify the brothers who were at the scene, the team finally reached the 4th man who was at the house before the shooting went down. As soon as he arrived at the headquarters, he was taken into an interrogation room for questioning. Detective Jeremy and another detective went in to question the witness. When he entered the investigation room, he identified himself. He told the witness to tell him everything that he remembers about the murder. He said he got to the house on Sunday when the game was on. He said Blue was on one couch while Ray was on another couch. He said the two men from California were there along with two other men that he didn't recognize watching the playoff game. He said he told them he wants to go and cook. He said he went home and started cooking. He said his wife told him to go and check on Blue because he just got shot. He said by the time he got to the terrace, he met policemen everywhere. Detective Julius asked him if he remembers the time he left there to go and cook. The witness said it was around 7:40 p.m. Detective Jeremy asked him if the guys were still there when he left. He said they were still there. Detective Jeremy asked the witness if he will able to identify the guys from California if he sees their picture. He said he will. Detective Jeremy showed him a photo lineup of the man in the blue Honda. The witness was able to pick him out. Detective Jeremy showed him another photo lineup. He picks him out along with his elder brother. Detective Jeremy and Detective Julius appreciated the witness for his time and they walked out of the investigation room. 2 days later, the man in the blue Honda told Detective Rogers that he wants to talk. He was brought to headquarters and immediately taken to an interrogation room. Detective Rogers and Detective Jeremy went into the investigation room to interrogate him. As soon as they entered the room, Detective Rogers told him to say what he wanted to talk about. He said 2 of his closest friends got killed. He said when he heard the news, he thought it was a lie. He said there is no way anybody could have snaked them like that unless it was somebody they knew and let them into the house. Detective Jeremy asked why he was at the house that day. He said he went there because he needed something from him. Detective Jeremy asked him what he needed from him. He said he needed 4 ounces. He said he went there specifically to buy marijuana from Ray. He said when he walked into the house, he collected the 4 ounces and put them in his pocket. He said he was smoking weed with the other dudes from California, and they were also watching the playoff game. He said he left after some time and came back. Detective Jeremy asked him why he came back. He said he went there to pick his brother. Detective Jeremy said why did he want to pick his brother? He said because his brother hasn't seen Ray in a minute. Detective Rogers asked him what was going on in the house when he went in. He said the same thing. He said he and his brother left the house about 2 hours before the murders. Detective Rogers asked him if every other person was there when he and his brother left. He said everybody was there. Detective Rogers told the suspect that he wants to be straightforward with him. He said they know that he didn't leave during the daytime as he claimed. He said they know he was there at night. The suspect said he was not there at night. Detective Rogers asked the suspect where he was when the murder happened. He said when his partner and the victims got killed, he was nowhere around there. He said he would have been dead if he was there because he was on drink and was already dozing out. He said he was fighting his sleep all day. He said he wouldn't have been there talking to them if he was there when the murder happened. He said God woke him up. He said God told him to go somewhere. Detective Julius asked him where he went to. He said he went to his grandma's house. Detective Julius looked the suspect in the eye and asked him who did the shooting. He asked the suspect who shot Ray and Blue. Detective Julius said he is getting fed up. He asked the suspect that who did the shooting between him and his brother. The suspect said if he had something to do with the shooting, he would have told them. Detective Julius told the suspect that if he wants the matter to go far, he is fine with it. He stood up and left the room in anger. Detective Julius joined his team members and they had a short discussion. At the end of the discussion, they decided to hold on to the suspect while they track his brother. Detective Julius put a call through to the brother. He told him that they want him at the headquarters for questioning. He said he will be right there because he has nothing to hide. 30 minutes later, he showed up at the headquarters. He was immediately taken into an interrogation room. Detective Julius and Detective Jeremy went in there to interrogate him while other team members watched from outside. As soon as they entered the investigation room, Detective Julius asked the suspect if he knew why they were there. He said he knows. He said it's because of Blue and Ray. Detective Julius told the suspect to take him through what happened that day. The suspect said his brother came to him that day and asked him if he wants a ride with him over there. He said they went to Terrace to see his partner, Blue. and Ray. He said they watched the playoff together. Detective Julius asked the suspect who was at the house when they got there. He said they met Blue, Ray, and two other dudes that he doesn't recognize. He said there was also the man who left around 8 p.m. to cook dinner. He said there wasn't anything going on rather than watching all of them watching the game. He said a few minutes later, his brother came to him and told him that they should leave. Detective Julius asked the suspect what time they left. He asked it if it was dark. The witness said it was dark when they all left. Detective Julius asked the suspect who was there when they all left. He said to be honest, he thinks they were the last people to leave. Detective Julius asked him again whether they were the last people to leave. He said they were the last people to leave if he isn't mistaken. Detective Jeremy told the suspect that the issue they have is that what he is saying is different from what his brother is saying. Detective Julius told the suspect to explain to him how his brother got hold of his codeine. He said he doesn't. He said he couldn't tell them. He said he doesn't have the codeine, but his brother had it. He said if he knows the killer, he would tell them. Detective Jeremy and Detective Julius told the suspect to give them a second, and they walked out of the investigation room. Detective Jeremy and Detective Julius joined other team members who were watching the interrogation on their screens. Detective Jeremy said he thinks the elder brother is more honest. Detective Jeremy worked on the case for 5 more months before he finally got a break. A man came forward claiming that the man Blue was feuding with was involved in the murder. He said the man was screaming in the hood like everyone that challenges him will end up like Blue and Ray. The man Blue was feuding with has prior convictions for receiving stolen property. He spent 5 years in prison after pleading guilty for drug possession with the intent to distribute. Detective Jeremy said it is clear that hatred exists between the two. He said they gave to find the man, sit him down and see what they can get from him. 2 months later, with no sign of the man, Detective Jeremy left the homicide and ended off the case to Detective Rogers. After a 5-month search, officers finally tracked down the man Blue was feuding with and he was arrested on a warrant. Detective Rogers said he can't wait to interview the man and see what he can get from him. He said Detective Jeremy is not coming back, so he has to interview. Detective Rogers went into the interrogation room with another officer, while the rest of the team members watched the interrogation from their computers. As soon as Detective Rogers entered the investigation room, he told the suspect that he wants to know what happened in Terrace. The suspect said he doesn't know what is going on. He said he was at home recovering from gunshot wounds on the night that Blue and Ray were murdered. Detective Rogers told the suspect to tell him what happened before then. The suspect said Blue paid some boys $1,500 and a half ounce of powder to come and kill him. He said when he came out of his store, they started shooting at him. Detective Rogers asked the suspect why he was shot. He said he doesn't know. Detective Rogers told the suspect to take him through what happened on the day Ray and Blue were killed. The suspect said he was at home on his sofa smoking a blunt of weed that day. He said he was at home minding his business. He didn't go anywhere. Detective Rogers asked the suspect where his son was that day. He said his son was at his aunt's house in Pritchard. The suspect said he was happy it was all over. He said they shouldn't get him wrong because he was happy. He said he was happy because no more shooters are coming at him. He said he cared less what happened to them because they paid some folks to kill him. Detective Rogers asked the suspect that why does he think that people are saying he was involved in the murder of Blue and Ray. He said he thinks that when the feud got them, he told some folks that Blue had that dope and they came and got him. He said there hasn't been anything since then. He said that's the only thing he can think of. Detective Rogers asked him who he contacted to make it happen. He said he didn't contact anybody. He said he doesn't have friends. He said he prefers to be in custody because it's safer for him compared to the neighborhood. The suspect became angry and said he isn't talking anymore. He said they should take him to the Metro. He said he is cool with that. Detective Rogers and his colleague walked out of the interrogation room and joined other members. The man Blue was feuding with was taken to jail on his unrelated warrant. Detective Rogers said he will check all his phone records. He said if he pulled that off, he will certainly make calls to some people. He said he will check his phone records and see if there is any link. Detective Rogers was unable to secure accurate phone records for the prepaid cell phones used by the man beefing with Blue. The man has not been charged with any crime concerning Blue and Ray's murders. 2 years later, the case remained unsolved. 7 p.m. in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a caller called 911. The caller says he is calling for something that he just saw on 75. He said there are 3 cars on the side of the road. He said as he was approaching them, one gentleman jumped out of his car and ran to the car directly behind him. He said it looked like a gentleman started punching the driver. He said somebody is going to need some help there. The 911 operator said he was going to notify officers. The first respondent arrived and they found an avalanche in another Honda in the middle of the highway. They also saw a woman with a gunshot in the passenger seat of the Honda. Unfortunately, they found the woman dead before they could get to her. A 23-year-old detective, Reggie Warren, who joined homicide 3 months ago, will lead the case. This will be the second case he will be leading since he joined homicide. Juan is also a singer who sings on occasions when he is not working. Former homicide detective Justin is the one supervising the scene. According to a witness on the scene, the victim was seen breaking into the avalanche. The witness said the owner shows up in that avalanche. He said he believed the owner had an altercation with the white guy in the Honda. The white guy driving the Honda had fled the scene. He said the bullet penetrated the victim's head and neck. Because the owner of the Honda had fled the scene, the officers cannot search the car unless they have a warrant. The man who fought the man in the Honda stayed on the scene. Detectives took him into the car and made their way back to homicide for questioning. Detective Reggie said he will like to speak to the 2 witnesses who drove by after the shooting. As soon as they arrived at homicide, Detective Reggie started the interrogation with the man who fought the man in the Honda. Then, tell me what happened, Detective Reggie asked. He said his daughter needed to get to work, so he came to pick her up with the avalanche. He said as soon as he pulled over, he saw 2 men jump out from his car, and they ran through to the Honda. He said he asked them what they wanted to do, and they told him they were going to shoot his black ass. He said the driver of the Honda pulled a gun at him. He said when he saw the gun, he tried to push him and he started jostling with him. He said it was during that process that he heard a sound from the gun. 4 a.m. in Mobile, Alabama, a call came in from a club on the east side. The 911 operator picks the call and asked where the location of the emergency of the caller was. Shotgun Willie, who called in, said they just saw someone come in and shoot somebody. The caller said one of their security guards is bleeding on the ground unconscious. He said he is not breathing. He is also not moving. Oh my God, says the caller. A team of policemen rushed to the scene and found a man lying dead on the floor. Detective Julius Nettles will lead the investigation. Any identification on him? A policeman on the scene of the incident asked. No, another officer replied. He told them to check his pockets if they could find anything. 40-year-old Jeremy is the victim. He had a passion for fixing cars. He has been working as a security guard at the club for the past years. He lives behind a loving family. The team finds several bullet fragments at the scene of the incident. Is there any witness to this? An officer asked. Oh yes, one of the bartenders, another officer replied. The detective goes to the bartender to have a chat with him. He asked him what happened. The bartender said the gentleman that shot Jeremy was just so intoxicated. He said he was kind of being rude and just a little obnoxious. He said the shooter was at his bar and went over there and poured a beer out on the floor. He said when Jeremy saw that he was pouring beer on the floor, he went there and told him to leave. He said the shooter didn't want to leave and so Jeremy just reached around and got him in a chokehold. He said it stops and the man said something and went outside. He said after some time, the man comes back in and they just heard all the shots. The detective asked the bartender how much time the killer stood outside before he came back in. The bartender said 45 seconds. The detective asked him if he knows the person, and the bartender said he knows his face. He said he has seen him before. The detective asked him to describe the killer. He said he is in his mid-30 seconds, short and stocky. The detective asked if he is black or white, and he said he is black. 1 hour in, the team discovered the shooting may have been cut in on surveillance of the club. They started the video minutes before Jeremy was shot. From the video, they were able to ascertain the story of the bartender who was a witness. The video has finally revealed who the killer was. "Anybody knows who the suspect is?" a detective asked. He got no reply, which means none of the officers knows the suspect. Later, the bartender gives the team a credit card receipt signed by the suspect. The receipt showed that the shooter is Dwayne. 35 years old Dwayne has prior convictions, including second-degree forgery and second-degree assault. Before heading back to homicide, Detective Nettles and Detective Butner decided to notify Jeremy's family about the incident. The two detectives arrived at Jeremy's house and they knocked on the door. Jeremy's grandmother came out to see who was at the door. She met the two officers, who introduced themselves, and she allowed them in. Detectives spoke with Jeremy's grandmother, who raised him as a son. They left after the conversation. 4 hours in, Detective Jeff and Detective Germain head out to show the line up to the bartender who witnesses the shooting. When they got to his home, they tendered the photographs. Detective Jeff told the bartender to take a look at the photo. Angela was survived by 2 sisters and 5 children. After some hours, Detective Jason White looks her up in a database and gets an address for her family members. When the team got here, they met a member of Angela's family, and they informed her about the death of Angela. Detective Reggie told her how important it is to get Angela's killer. Detective Reggie told her that the killer is in his 30 seconds. He is either short hair or bald. But the family member doesn't know who Angela has been hanging out with. The team thanked her and headed back to homicide. A few hours later, Detective Jason White forwards the team a possible lead from an ATF agent. Back to the murder of 40 years old security guard Jeremy Smith. Detectives hope their witness can identify Dwayne as the shooter. The team searches for his last known address and headed there immediately they found it. Detective Nettles and another officer knocked on the door of the apartment, and a woman answers the door. Detective Nettle asked her if Dwayne was there, and she replied by saying Dwayne would have come out if he was there. She said Dwayne used to live there, but he and his girlfriend have left the apartment several months ago. A detective finds Dwayne's girlfriend in the database and gets her phone number. The team put a call through to Dwayne's girlfriend and she gave them her address. On their way to Dwayne's girlfriend's house, Dwayne's mom put a call through to the team and told them she and Dwayne would be at the police headquarters in 30 minutes. After some minutes, Dwayne's girlfriend arrived at Homicide. She said she heard that Dwayne might have shot somebody. The team asked her where she heard that. She said people have been calling her phone all day. The team asked her when was the last time she talked to Dwayne, and she told them around 4 o'clock in the morning. She said Dwayne came through the door and he was like, they are coming for me. Back to the murder of 46-year-old Angela. Detectives just received a tape that a man reached out to an attorney and said he was involved in the shooting. The name of the man is Matthew Elijah. 34-year-old Matthew Elijah has prior convictions including assault with a deadly weapon. 20 minutes later, Matthew reaches out to an attorney. Some hours later, Matthew put a call through to Homicide and agrees to turn himself in. He gave them an address where he will be waiting for them. The team got into the car and headed to the address Matthew gave them. When the team arrived at the address, they surveyed the area waiting for Matthew to approach them. One of the team members who was standing at another place radioed the team members and told them he has a visual on Matthew. He told them Matthew is walking southbound, drinking at 40, and wearing a ball cap. Matthew was finally apprehended and brought to Homicide. Detective Reggie reaches out to the man who fought with Matthew at the scene to see if he can identify Matthew. Back to the murder of Jeremy Smith. The team hopes the suspect, who is Dwayne's girlfriend, can explain why Dwayne may have pulled the trigger. She said Dwayne was like, they are coming. The detective asked if he said anything other than that. She said that was what he said and he went right on back out after that. The detective asked if he had a gun at that point, and she said she did not see a gun with him at that point because his pants were way down. The detective asked if she tried to call him after that. She said she called but she got no response. The detective appreciated Dwayne's girlfriend for being truthful with him and left the interrogation room. After some minutes, Dwayne's mother brought him to Homicide as she promised earlier. It was time for questioning. A detective entered the interrogation room where Dwayne was being held. He told Dwayne that they had already seen the video of what happened. What they just wanted to know is why he did what he did. Dwayne told the officer that he was not ready to say anything. The detective left the interrogation room in surprise. The team went back to the video to see if there is any reason why Dwayne would not want to talk, but they could not find any. The team concluded that Dwayne would be charged for murder. 12 hours into the next 48, Detective Nettles closed his case.